So I'm with Rabbi Dov Lipman, a member of the Knesset here in the Knesset in Jerusalem. Now, Rabbi Lipman, what's it like for you serving your country as a member of the Knesset?
I have to be honest with you that every single day we drive to Jerusalem, and as the car turns the corner and I see the building in front of me, the Knesset, the Jewish parliament in a Jewish state with the Israeli flag, I look up and I say thank you to God for the opportunity. What an opportunity, what a blessing to be able to come to work every day and work towards change and improving the situation for the Jewish people, but for all people of faith in the land of Israel. So for me, it's been nothing short of a blessing, and I don't take it for granted at all.
Have you always been interested in politics?
I was always interested in politics and government. I never aspired to be a member of parliament. That wasn't a dream of mine. That wasn't a plan that I had. I'm an educator. I've been teaching Jewish education for over 20 years, and I actually landed a dream job teaching Jews from around the world who would come to Israel for a year or two between high school and university and strengthen their connection to religion, strengthen their faith, strengthen their connection to the land. It was a dream. But I started to see issues that bothered me in our state. And I realized that if I want to impact, it's easy to sit back and complain and criticize, but we have an opportunity to do something about it. So that's what brought me into politics and into the actual system itself.
Now, quite a lot of people in Israel, they're just secular. Do you want to see more of a spiritual value brought back into the life of Israel?
I do want to see more of a spiritual value, but I think the way to do that is for the religious and secular to work together. For decades, it's been religious against secular in a battle which I don't think is healthy for Jewish people and for the Jewish state. So I think we'll succeed in bringing more of a spiritual value and core Jewish values to the state if we on the religious side ease off a little bit on the secular side, because essentially by trying to force religion on the rest of the state, I think we've pushed away 50% of the population which views themselves as secular. We need to give them the ability to function and to breathe and to connect Jewishly on their own, and then I do believe that overall there'll be a spiritual renaissance and a Jewish state that's run by not Jewish law but by core Jewish values.
Now, you are a rabbi. How is the relationship between Christians and Jews?
So it's interesting, not only am I a rabbi, but I also grew up in the United States, and that's a very important component over here, because for me, living with Christian neighbors and Christian friends is natural. That's what I did. I grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland. The people around us on the streets were Christian, and we were best of friends and good neighbors. In Israel, it's not as much of a given. Israelis aren't used to that, and they don't know necessarily how does that work. Part of what I'm trying to do is to educate Israelis about not only how well we can get along with Christians in Israel, but Christians around the world. That this is a critical relationship where we share core values, where Christians around the world understand the benefit or the value or the need for a strong and secure Israel as a Jewish state. And we need to work very hard to strengthen that relationship. And I try as much as I can in Israel to educate people about how natural that relationship can and must be.
Why do you think Christians have a love for the Jewish people?
Bottom line is we come from the same people, we come from the same values, and the notion of bringing not just monotheism, but bringing God into a place where it permeates every aspect of our lives, that's something which we share. Christians open up their Bible and they see that the land of Israel was given to the Jewish people, and they believe that with all their heart and soul. And they believe that anything but that is actually going against the Bible and against their faith system. But when you start looking at some of the core values of loving one another, of bringing God into every element of our life, of trying to share the Word of God with everyone around the world, that's something which we share together. And make no mistake about it, when we talk about the common enemy, I don't like talking in terms of enemies, but when you talk about fundamentalist Islam, which is, forget any persecution of Jews, they're persecuting Christians, and the world is silent. Israel, together with Christians around the world, need to unite in this battle to defeat it, number one, and to show the loving values of the Bible and of God instead of what the other side represents.
Now, in the past, Christians haven't been a very good example to the Jewish people with some of the things that they've done. Do you think things have changed now, and that Israel and Jewish people really see the love that the Christians have for the Jews?
There's no doubt that plays a role in some of the skepticism or fears amongst some Jews, and especially in Israel. But I think that the moment that you had a pope who stood up and openly openly talked about the sins of the Christian past, and it's time to redo the contract between the Jews and Christians around the world. Add that to the Christian policies over the last 50 years, which have been only favorable towards the Jewish people. I believe that we can absolutely turn the page. And as people of faith, you do have to be forgiving as well. And we can be forgiving in terms of what has happened in the past and only focus on building towards a stronger future together.
Now, how can Christians better pray for the nation of Israel?
I have to tell you that as I travel around the world, one of the greatest sources of strength for me has been Christians who have told me day in and day out that they pray for the state of Israel, they pray for our success. That not just warms the heart, it gives you the strength to realize you're not isolated, because we live in a world where I travel to various countries and we're isolated, that the hatred and the venom towards Israel and the Jewish people is so palpable and real and scary to see that, and then to hear of people who get up every single day and even once or twice a day pray for the Jewish people. I was in New York and there was a Christian group there that talked about how every single Sunday they get together and they do a special prayer just for Israel as a state and the people of Israel. I just ask people to continue doing so. I don't tell people how to pray, but everybody in their own way. There's no doubt that the prayers help. If I can just tell you one anecdote, my wife's father was in the U.S. Army, and they grew up in. My wife grew up and spent years in West Point, which is the U.S. Military Academy. In the U.S. Military Academy, they have a course called Military History, where they teach the history of wars, how they're won and lost. They don't teach the Six-Day War, which brought the unification of Jerusalem, in the U.S. Military Academy, because they cannot explain it militarily. They know there's another force at work, and we understand that force is God. So prayers work, and anybody who prays for Israel, it makes a difference, and we're thankful for it, everyone in their own way. I would say at the same time, we have to reciprocate and pray for the benefit of our Christian friends and for Christians who are being persecuted throughout the Middle East and in the world, and that has to stop as well.
Do you think Israel is at a turning point at the moment? We see the threat from the north, threats from Gaza, and ISIS is close to Israel's doorstep. How can Israel stand against all these threats?
You know, you go back to May 1948, and David Ben-Gurion stood up and declared a state of Israel, and knowing that all of the Arab states, outnumbering us hundreds of times over, were going to attack us, and we withstood that. 67, the same thing. All the Arab countries, major armies coming up against us, and we withstood that, and not only withstood that, but actually went on the offensive during that war in defense. Yom Kippur War, when Israel was on the brink of disaster, when it looked like the Syrian army was going to break through and go to Haifa, and in the end, we withstood that. I don't sit in my office here in the Knesset with any fear about the demise of the state of Israel because of our enemies. Yes, we have to take every single threat seriously. We have to figure out the right tactics to be able to deal with it. But again, I move forward with the confidence that God showers us with his blessings and will come out and survive all of these attempts to destroy us, as the Jewish people have done throughout our history. And again, we have to pray. We have to take action. We have to have a strong military. We have to make sure that we have the right friends around the world who are giving us the support that we need. But when it's all said and done, I don't view a doomsday scenario. I just see light as we move forward.
Now, do you think the world and the media don't understand Israel's position, and do you see it as a spiritual battle against the nation of Israel?
So first of all, they don't. Your observation is correct. I mean, to imagine a scenario where there are missiles flying into our cities and tunnels being dug into our backyards, and anyone would suggest that somehow our response was disproportionate. That's one of two things. It's either a complete lack of understanding of the situation, or it is blatant and outright anti-Semitism. Sometimes anti-Israel statements are really covering over some kind of a hidden anti-Semitism. Yes, there is a spiritual battle. Yes, there are people out there who don't want to see a strong Jewish state and a strong Judaism. And there again, that's where we find our Christian friends being so supportive, where they're saying, we not only see it as something beneficial, we're going to fight to make sure that it happens. We're going to pray to make sure that it happens. But yes, we face up with a world which is unfair towards us, which is biased towards us in a negative way. And that's part of the challenge that we have as a Jewish state.
Now, the biggest evil of anti-Semitism, of course, was the Holocaust. And your grandmother went through the Holocaust. Tell me a little bit about that.
So my grandmother's family lived in a village called Kerestir in Hungary. And in May 1944, they were all put into cattle cars and shipped off to Auschwitz-Birkenau in Poland. and they arrived there actually on Shavuot night, on the Feast of the Tabernacles in May 1944. And that night, my grandmother, who was a teenager at the time, saw her father, her mother, her siblings all taken to be slaughtered that night. And she was spared. She was young and somewhat healthy, and through miracles survived her time there. I had the honor of going back and visiting Auschwitz-Birkenau last year as a member of Knesset, and we went during the winter, and it was snow on the ground. It was so cold. It was so cold, and it's very interesting. Everyone somewhere in the back of your mind has the question of, where was God? How can this kind of a thing happen in a world where there's a loving God? How does this happen? And that question was answered for me when I was there, because I called my grandmother the next day and I said, how did you survive this? I couldn't handle 1 hour in that cold, and I was bundled up with coats and boots and socks. And she said, I don't know. I can't. There was no tactic. I don't know how I survived it. And then I realized that's where God was. Man was doing the evil, and God was there helping people survive. And despite the fact that there was a deliberate attempt to annihilate the Jewish people, God was there to pull us out of it, to pull my grandmother out of it, and to see things come full circle. To that 70 years ago, my grandmother was in Auschwitz on the brink of destruction for herself and the Jewish people. And now we're sitting here together in the Jewish state, in the Jewish capital, comfortably, and as a member of a Jewish parliament. That to me is no greater proof of the loving God that's actively involved in our lives and gives me inspiration every single day.
I imagine for you that there's actually family members missing because they went through the Holocaust.
The numbers are staggering. The numbers of my grandmother's, not just parents, but siblings, but also nieces and nephews. Over 30 nieces and nephews were eliminated, taken away from the world that night. And yes, our family would be much larger. But I have to say, my grandmother was blessed to live to see great-grandchildren being born, and she's still alive today. She has a great-granddaughter getting married in 2 weeks.
Wow.
So she's lived to see unbelievable things. And even though, yes, we took a hit, and yes, it's very painful to know that I could never meet my great-grandfather. My mother never met her grandparents. And my grandmother was left without parents in her family for most of her life. To see the rebirth that's what we focus on. We don't focus on the negative, but we focus on look what has happened despite the attempts of the Nazis and Hitler to destroy us.
Does your Jewish faith help you get over something like that?
Very much. I think that any tragedy that a person experiences, they need to have faith as their source of inspiration. My father passed away 10 years ago, and as an only son, he's my best friend in the world, and I feel empty without him. But I know that there's a loving God who he's close to now and who loves me, and that gives constant inspiration. So the same thing with the Holocaust, and the same thing with everything that we experience as a Jewish people, or as people of faith in general around the world. Despite all the attempts to annihilate us or our faith, and this applies to Christians today as well, we know that we'll persevere, and we know that there's a God who loves us and cares for us and appreciates the fact that we're sticking strong to our faith despite all the sadness and tragedy, and in the end we'll emerge victorious.
Now, do you see a rise of anti-Semitism around the world at the moment, and is it a spiritual battle?
We do. We see it especially with the advent of the social network. On the one hand, the social network and the internet can be a source of spiritual inspiration. There's no doubt both the Jewish and the Christian faith ministries around the world use it in that way. But boy, is it used as a vehicle of hate. And when you see Facebook pages about Hitler arises from the dead and millions of people getting involved in this, it's scary to see it. There is hate. And I have absolutely no doubt that it relates to spirituality. Because what do we bring to the world? We bring to the world a message of honesty and morality and decency and certain values which people would rather forget about and not have to be beholden to. And there's no doubt that somewhere deep inside, that's what brings out this hatred, both towards Jews and towards Christians. And that's why we have to view ourselves as being in a joint battle, not just for our physical existence, but also for our spiritual existence. It's our job to work together to bring that spirituality to the world and fight all that evil and fight all that anti-spirituality with even more spirituality and with even more positive messages. And that's what hopefully we'll continue to do.
Now, one of the biggest threats of anti-Semitism today is Iran, and Iran are producing nuclear material. Do you see them as a big threat, and why isn't the world doing anything about it?
So let's think about this for a moment. There's a country which stood up and said that their goal, stated goal, is to annihilate the state of Israel and to annihilate the Jewish people. And they're attempting to get nuclear weapons. And the world somehow is buying into their face of, we'll make a deal, we'll make an agreement, trust us. How do you trust them? And I believe that Christians around the world and Jews need to pressure their heads of state, pressure their members of parliament to do anything possible to stop that deal from happening. Because let's make no mistake about it, this is not just a threat to the state of Israel. It's a threat to the whole free world. Iran is a country, when we had the Cold War in the United States with Russia, there was something called MAD. MAD stood for Mutually Assured Destruction. There was a theory that Russia would never send nuclear weapons to the United States because the United States would send nuclear weapons back and destroy Russia. So why would they risk destroying themselves? With Iran, that's not the case. Not the case. They are fundamentalist Islam jihadists, and they have no problem losing 10, 20, 30 million of their people if it means that they've accomplished their goals of killing Jews and killing Christians and fighting against the free world. So it's time for the world to wake up and realize that. We in Israel are certainly doing whatever we can to stop the development and the emerging very bad deal for not just Israel but the whole world. It's something we have to pray for, but also take action. And there should be, hopefully, religious people around the world, spiritual people around the world rising up and saying, we won't tolerate this.
Now, Israel has probably one of the best armies in the world. Is ISIS a threat to the nation of Israel?
It will be. There's no doubt that they have their sights set on Israel as well. But like I said before, Israel is very confident in its ability to fight whatever battles it has to fight. We're not overconfident. We're confident because we know that we'll fight the war and God will help us win the war and we'll be okay. But we're watching it very carefully. And like I said before, we're concerned for the world. It's not just when we see innocent people suffering, and especially Christians, due to this phenomenon, and the brutality and the way that they kill people in the most inhumane, animalistic manners possible, we would like to do nothing but join the world's effort to fight against it. As you can understand, because there are Arab countries involved, they want Israel to take a seat on the side. But believe me, Israel will do anything that it can do to help. And as it comes closer to our borders, we'll become more proactive as well.
And what's your prayer finally for the nation of Israel?
My prayer is, first of all, that our leaders should be guided to make the right decisions and all the difficult decisions that face us on a daily basis. That's number one. I pray that all Jews around the world will realize that this is their home and they'll come home. There's no reason to be living all around the world in places which are somewhat foreign to us, even if they're friendly. Strengthen the Jewish state by coming and living here. And I pray that Israel become a place where people of faith from around the world feel at home, feel a spiritual connection, and recognize that when it's all said and done, all people of faith are brothers and sisters. And let's use the state of Israel as the platform to be a true light unto the nations.
Okay, Rabbi Lipman, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and blessings to all.